Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Hopefully we had a wonderful work week, and I'm sure we're all super excited about the weekend on the way. I've got a pretty kind of in-depth video for you today. I've managed to make sure to find enough time today to really sit down, make a good forecast, and give you a pretty quality video, at least I hope so, before, again, we take tomorrow off since it is Saturday. But of course, I will be back Sunday with another video, and I actually don't work Sunday, so it should be even easier to get a video out on Sunday. But again, just want to let you know ahead of time, this video may run a little bit long, and probably not too long, but this could be in the 15 to 20 minute ballpark compared to my usual 10 to 15 minute ballpark. So we're going to talk a lot today about a lot of different things. Obviously what's going on here in the continental United States here, but also we're going to discuss the tropics a bit, as we do have some interesting things going on out in the Atlantic, and I definitely want to keep you up to date on that like I promised you the past couple of videos. So with all that said, definitely make sure to leave a like if you like the video, comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Also, consider subscribing if you haven't already. And yeah, so I guess with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So we'll start here by taking a look at current satellite imagery, and we do have some interesting things going on. So we have one low pressure system kind of spinning away up here into the northeast, and this is bringing a pretty extensive area of clouds as well as showers and storms for a lot of folks in places that really don't need it. We've seen so much flooding up here into the northern Appalachian Mountains here up into upstate New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and it is just continuing today with a lot of rain. And you'll see on our next map, we even have flood watches up for folks up in that part of the country. Now, the other thing to note, obviously, is this other big area of clouds and storm menace over kind of the Arkansas and Missouri area. And as we go through tonight and the next really 24 hours or so, this big cluster of storms is going to kind of move on through this way before eventually exiting out over the Atlantic Ocean. So if you're kind of in the path of that, you're definitely going to see some showers and storms over the next 24 to 48 hours. But the good news is it should sweep on through, and then behind it there should be pretty nice weather. So not a washout for anybody, but definitely expect that to roll on through a lot of areas of the southeast over the next 24 hours or so. So taking a look at our current watches, warnings, and radar imagery, we'll start up into the northeast and then work our way out from there. You'll see we do have a pretty extensive area of showers and storms, and again, all of this because of that low pressure system. Now, in terms of watches, we are getting some severe weather out of this, as we talked about yesterday, including the severe thunderstorm watch for much of western Mass, southern New Hampshire, Vermont, extreme eastern, and I really do mean extreme eastern New York State. And in fact, by the time you're watching this, probably the threat will be over for you folks there. But over the evening hours up tonight, expect these showers and storms to continue to strengthen and tap into some of that wind energy as well as instability, bringing with it a wind threat, a little bit of a hail threat, and also a tornado threat for a lot of folks here going through the Boston metro area, through Providence, Rhode Island, Concord, New Hampshire, and kind of surrounding areas, seeing those severe storms. And then those flood watches and flash flood watches up here into kind of the Adirondack Park area up through upstate New York and into much of Vermont, seeing, again, just a lot of flooding due to these low pressures that have just continued to swing on through those areas over the past couple of weeks. Now, zooming out of there a little bit, looking at the Ohio and Tennessee River Valley for our friends here. Really nice Friday, honestly, for a lot of you folks here. In fact, you'll probably notice that drier weather and drier air is working its way on in, and it might even feel a touch like fall for maybe some folks in July. Again, really not fall-like weather, but compared to maybe what we have been seeing, it'll feel really nice, and it might actually just feel downright like fall up on some of those higher peaks into West Virginia over the next 24 to 48 hours. So I'm sure a lot of you folks will definitely get out there and enjoy that. Now, further to the south and east for our folks here, again, this big complex of storms is going to continue to work on through this area from Arkansas through Memphis, northern Alabama, North Georgia, and then through the Carolinas tomorrow. Again, this will work its way on through, bringing with it maybe a little bit of severe weather, but nothing too crazy, and nothing we certainly haven't been able to deal with before. Now, the other big story, of course, is all of the heat still surrounding the Gulf Coast. Unfortunately for you folks down here, we're not going to really get relief from that heat just due to the fact that that cooler air from Canada isn't going to be able to make it quite that far south, and that's common for this time of year. But places north of there, really kind of the I-20 corridor here northbound, are going to see some relief from that heat this weekend. So taking a look at today's severe weather threat, again, up in the northeast, we have that area that we just looked at where we have that severe thunderstorm watch. Again, wind threat being the largest, but can't rule out a tornado or two. And then for folks down here into the southeast, for everyone watching from here, we do have a slight risk for severe weather for some afternoon storms from Atlanta over towards Birmingham, northern Mississippi, and back even towards the Little Rock area, and even as far south and east as Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. Now, tomorrow, the severe threat dies down significantly, and by the time we get into Sunday, there's really not much severe weather threat at all, but do expect still some showers and storms to pop up around the Gulf Coast area tomorrow, and even into areas as far north as southern South Carolina, down towards the coastal plain, seeing some strong storms, and main threat tomorrow would just be some strong straight-line winds, but can't rule out a little bit of hail as well. So taking a look at future radar, again, some things to note here are going to be tonight, these showers and storms finally working their way on through the northeast, and by the time we get into tomorrow, it should really improve up there. While that's ongoing, still watch this big cluster of storms and where that moves over the next 24 hours or so. So as we go into tonight, this is 8 o'clock tonight, still expecting those strong storms up into the northeast, so definitely watching those and the potential for those to become strong to severe. And then by the time we get into around sunset tonight, around 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, this area of storms will be working on through the Memphis area and northern Mississippi. Now, as we go later into the overnight, we're going to have to watch this complex of storms as they could kind of begin to organize and form a bit of an MCS. And what that is pretty much just a strong line of storms, much like we saw in North Georgia yesterday, although this line of storms would be moving kind of west to east here across northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, and into the western Carolinas by early tomorrow morning. And as we get towards early tomorrow morning, about 7, 8 o'clock, again, this MCS, or what's left of it, will be working on through Georgia and the Carolinas, and also some leftover showers possible behind that through Birmingham and surrounding areas. Now, the good news for tomorrow morning is it looks much drier into the northeast, and you'll see on our next map, it will also feel much nicer as well as those dew points work their way on down. Now, going into tomorrow afternoon, expect some scattered showers and storms into the Carolinas as that leftover MCS continues to work its way on through. But looking at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and I'll actually bring this ahead even a little bit more into about the 5 o'clock hour, overall speaking, it is really nice out there. Pretty dry. Can't rule out, of course, afternoon showers and storms, but not very widespread afternoon showers and storms, and nothing looks to be able to get very strong or severe outside of the Gulf Coast region. And that will even continue likely into our Sunday. Again, if you're kind of south of I-20 into the Gulf Coast area, I do expect still strong showers and storms, but everyone north of there, Saturday looks really nice, and even Sunday looks really nice as well, although this map doesn't quite go out that far. So kind of really the even cherry on top of this is how nice it's going to feel. So dew points right now out there at about the 3, 4 o'clock hour, they're pretty high. We have, 70s and 60s for our dew points, and that is quite muggy, but I want you to watch it as we go through tonight and into this weekend. Look at this dew point map really begin to kind of crash down a little bit. So going into our afternoon on Saturday, you'll notice these 60s and 50s start to take over for a lot of people here kind of north of this red line. And it's going to just feel really comfortable south of there. Still a bit muggy on Saturday, especially south of I-20. But by the time we get into our Saturday overnight and into Sunday, those 60 dew points get as far south as the I-20 corridor, helping to make things feel much nicer. So again, I-20 northbound will really cash in on those nicer dew points. I-40 northbound will really definitely cash in on that. So for folks in Kentucky, West Virginia, areas northbound, it is going to feel really nice this weekend. So definitely get out there and enjoy it. In fact, looking at tomorrow's high temperatures, we're not going to break the 80s, again, really north of the I-20 corridor. So major populated areas only going to get into the 80s tomorrow with lower dew points. It's going to feel really nice, a great day for a hike, or maybe to go look at a waterfall or something, whatever you enjoy doing during the summertime, I guess. But again, just a really nice day tomorrow, and that should continue into Sunday, although a tad bit warmer on Sunday, and that muggy weather will begin to return. So going into early next week, I am expecting still this cooler weather to hang around a bit, but that won't last too long, especially once we get past Monday and Tuesday. Expect this kind of heat ridge to kind of build back in, and with it bringing much more above average temperatures as well as the return of muggy weather. Now, we will have kind of still an active jet stream pattern up here through the northern part of the country that will continue to bring showers and storms for places up north, but other than that, it also looks much drier next week, so it just looks kind of hot and dry for a lot of folks, and you can see that here on the latest GFS model as well. As we move this through this weekend, again, we talked about that, but early next week, again, expecting a couple of rounds of storms and maybe a front or two to work its way on through the northeast here. That could get as far south as the Ohio River Valley, but other than that, it looks pretty dry next week. So the northeast, the rain will continue next week, unfortunately, also probably through the Ohio River Valley northwards. But other than that, it looks pretty dry next week. And again, we'll likely get a couple rounds of those systems or fronts to work on through the northern tier of the country, specifically here, kind of in this circled area that I have on the map for you here. So from Maine all the way back over to Minnesota and as far south as Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Pennsylvania, seeing those rounds of systems or pieces of energy working on through next week. Now, in terms of temperatures next week, again, it'll be cooler than average this weekend, even likely going into Monday, potentially could be a bit cooler, but once we really get past Monday and get into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, look at this big shield of heat working its way back into the eastern part of the country, and specifically the Midwest. So anyone watching now into Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, it's going to be a very hot week next week, likely getting well past 100 degrees, up towards 105, maybe even 110 for isolated spots out here. And that's not even including the heat index, that's just the raw temperature. So again, a bit of a heat wave on store for a lot of folks next week. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to avoid this as well in the southeast, where we will also unfortunately kind of be affected by this. Now, if you're up in the northeast, especially up towards Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, it will be not as bad next week, again, mainly because we'll have those systems or fronts moving on through that will help to cool things down a bit up into this region. But other than that, it's just really going to be a really hot and muggy week next week for a lot of folks. Now, looking at rain over the next week, again, other than the rain that we're going to see over the next couple of days here along the Gulf Coast and the rounds of systems moving on through kind of the northeast, it's going to be pretty dry over the next week. So kind of in between here, those regions, we're going to have a very dry period over the next 7 days or so. And really specifically, next Monday through Friday looks really dry for a lot of folks. All right, so that's what's happening right now over the continental United States. Now I'm going to shift gears into the tropics because we do have some intriguing things ongoing out here that definitely need to be talked about. So we will definitely do that here. So currently we have Tropical Storm Dawn. Tropical Storm Dawn really is not a threat to anybody. We've been talking about this one a little bit. It's really just going to kind of do a loop-de-loop and then eventually work way on out into the North Atlantic and fizzle out. Now, the other area, Invest 95 here, is a bit of a different story. In fact, this is already up to a medium % chance of developing into a tropical system over the next 7 days, and it could do so even sooner than that. But this one definitely has that look for this time of year, being out here in this part of the Atlantic, where a lot of times we see pretty strong storms form. So anytime you see that, you automatically kind of catches your attention, and you definitely want to put an eye on it. So as for where we think this is going to go, that part is pretty straightforward, at least for the next 5 days or so. Pretty confident this is going to just continue to work here towards the Lesser Antilles and eventually work into the Caribbean Sea, or the Caribbean, however you want to pronounce it, once we get past kind of day 4 and into day 5. So I'm not expecting too bad of impacts out here into the Antilles as of right now, as I don't think this thing's going to get ramping up too quickly, although, definitely keep your eyes open here into this part of the world. But what happens after that, once it gets into the Caribbean, will be a pretty interesting picture to look at. So this next map I'm going to show you is our model intensity guidance. This is a bunch of spaghetti models or computer models that give their prediction on where we think this system is going to go in terms of strength and intensity. So the way this graph works, down here at the bottom is the forecast hours, so just how far from right now. Obviously 24 hours meaning a day from now, 72 hours meaning 3 days from now, 120 hours 5 days, and then 168 hours a week out, just to give an idea of what that means. Now, in terms of the other part of this graph, this is showing the intensity on how strong they think this system is going to get. So we have kind of two different camps right now. We have one chunk of models up here into the category 1 all the way up to category 3 range, which obviously would be very impactful and be quite a big news story if there were to be a storm of that magnitude in the Caribbean. But we also have another cluster down here that says this thing might not even form at all, or could just get up to tropical storm status. So definitely have some kinks to iron out here in the forecast, but anytime you see a cluster this large getting up towards these higher thresholds, you definitely want to watch it, especially whenever you're dealing with these above average water temperatures that we're dealing with out here that can very easily fuel these storms. So there are some limiting factors here for this system, and that is the good news. Now, the non-limiting factors are just how unstable the water is out here, meaning it's just very warm, and tropical systems love to feed off of that warm water, especially this time of year. So that is definitely one thing that is going to help the system out. Also, we're getting into late July and August, so climatology just tells us the later we get into hurricane season here, the more likely it is for storms to form out in this part of the world. Now, looking at some of the limiting factors, here is one that is definitely a big limiting factor. So, obviously, we have a big desert over northern Africa here, and what this does, it throws a lot of kind of dust into the air, or just sand and, other aerosols into the atmosphere, and this is pretty unhelpful to tropical storms. What this does is this keeps the humidity down. This very dry air works out here over the Atlantic and kind of chokes these systems out before they can ever really form. Obviously, whenever you see hurricanes move on through, it's very rainy, it's very muggy, so hurricanes and different kind of tropical systems love that. Now, what we're seeing right now, again, is this big plume of kind of brown or beige on your map, telling us that we're seeing very dry air. So as we move this ahead, that dry air looks to stay around a bit. Now, the storm in question is this kind of area of green down here where there is that more moist air with this tropical wave. But on the latest GFS, you'll notice this thing never can quite get into super favorable atmosphere in terms of how dry the air is. Now, this is whenever it really catches my eye. Is once this passes the Antilles and gets into the Caribbean here, you'll notice the dry air is less dry. The worst dry air is back here kind of behind this system, and ahead of it, there's a bit more of a favorable environment as this gets into the Caribbean, and that's why we're seeing some models kind of give this idea of, hey, maybe this thing could form into quite a strong system. So we'll definitely watch that once this gets into the Caribbean. Now, the other very important part for tropical systems is wind shear. Wind shear, if it's too strong, it'll rip them apart and it won't really allow them to gain strength. Now, right now, the wind shear isn't really all too bad around this thing. In fact, you'll notice it's kind of in a bit of a quiet pocket, while there is much stronger wind shear further off to its west here and north. Now, as we bring this ahead into time and going over the next couple of days, this will continue to be in a bit of a kind of lesser wind shear pocket. So looking at 72 hours from now going into early next week, you'll notice we have kind of this big circle around this thing of a relatively calm wind shear. Definitely some out there, but overall speaking, nothing off the charts. And even once this thing gets into the Caribbean, that's whenever, the forecast becomes a bit more questionable. But I will preface this by saying wind shear is one of those things that we do struggle to forecast quite a bit, and often it kind of comes from nowhere, and sometimes when we think it's going to be there, it's not quite there. So wind shear is a bit of a tough forecast, but definitely overall speaking, there is enough of a favorability area here that could definitely lead to tropical development over the next 7 days, and obviously we will definitely want to watch that. Now, as of right now, all we feel confident in is at least a tropical wave, maybe stronger, maybe a tropical storm, maybe even a hurricane could be out here into the Caribbean once we get past 5 days or so. Now, as for what happens after that, that's a way out there and a huge question mark, and any impacts to Hispaniola, Central America, or the United States are really just big question marks right now, and we don't really know much more than the fact that we have a tropical wave capable of developing into a storm working into the Caribbean over the next 5 days or so. So that's what I've got for you today on this Friday. Again, this video is probably a little bit longer than normal, maybe not quite 20 minutes, but definitely in that 17 to kind of 19-minute ballpark. And hopefully you enjoyed it, hopefully you learned something, and definitely let me know how you felt about the video in the comments. And I'm definitely happy I was able to find some time today to really sit down, analyze these models, and give you an in-depth forecast. So hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Also, to remind you here at the end, no video tomorrow because it is Saturday. That's another reason I made this video a bit more in-depth, but we'll definitely be back on Sunday with another update on that heat wave next week, as well as some of that tropical activity working its way on across the Atlantic. With that said, though, again, I hope you have a wonderful start to your weekend tomorrow, and I will see you all on Sunday.